Today's lesson is about the Modern Reader's Japanese-English Character Dictionary, also known as Nelson's Dictionary. That's usually how I refer to it. This is one of the books that you had to buy for this class. And while you're going through today's lesson, it's probably a good idea to have your dictionary out in front of you. Pause the video when you need to recreate some of the things that I'm going to be showing you as we move through the material. Now, I have the old version of the Modern Reader's Japanese Dictionary. You probably have the new one. I'm going to start with the old one. And we always refer to it as Nelson's because the editor of the dictionary's name was Nelson, Andrew Nelson to be precise. There are other dictionaries out there, but let me tell you a little bit about Nelson's and why I prefer it and recommend it for students. First of all, it uses the 214 kanji radical system. We just looked at that, so you should be familiar with it. Second of all, there are three versions you should be aware of. The original, or the old version, that's the one that I usually use. The new version, that's probably the one that you have. We're going to be covering both of those today. And there's also a compact version. I'll say a little bit about that in a few minutes. Nelson's was one of the first kanji English dictionaries on the market. It wasn't the first, but it was really the most comprehensive of its day. It first came out in the 1960s, and it is still the kanji dictionary that scholars, academics prefer. They may not use it on a daily basis once they become very advanced in their Japanese, but it really is a one-stop shop for lots of information. The original Modern Reader's Japanese-English Character Dictionary cover looks like this. It's red. This is helpful actually when you're looking for these things online, for example on Amazon. So this dictionary has about 5,000 kanji in it, and it also has about 70,000 compounds. By compounds I mean when you put one kanji with another kanji, so you've got two, or a combination of three, or a combination of four. I mention this because even if you're using, for example, a Japanese kanji dictionary that's just kanji to Japanese that a native speaker would use, the number of compounds that you find will probably be smaller than what you find in Nelson's. So that alone makes it a great resource. The entries in Nelson's have been arranged according to the traditional kanji radical system. There are a few characters that have changed what radical they're assigned to, but not too many. So if you've already learned the kanji system or you've been using another book that uses the kanji system, it's really easy to pick up a Nelson's and understand exactly how it's organized. This one is the new Nelson. This is probably the one that you have sitting in front of you on your desk. This was the creation of a number of different scholars, including the one editor who's noted on the cover, John Haig, as a reprint and an improvement upon the old Nelson's. So it's a major revision. It adds a lot of new words that weren't in existence when the old Nelson's was originally compiled. And the other thing about it that's quite different is that the organization has changed. Instead of using the traditional kanji radicals, although the kanji radicals are still part of the organization, what the new Nelson's has is what they call the Universal Radical Index. And I'm going to be saying more about that later on. The Universal Radical Index is designed for you. That is, it's designed for the undergraduate student who's still getting his or her land legs in terms of learning to use a kanji dictionary. Those of us who have been in the field for years and years and years are so steeped in the kanji system that it usually doesn't pose a problem, but we do recognize that learning the kanji system can be daunting. This is the compact Nelson. What can I tell you about it? Well, doesn't have a whole lot of characters. It's compact. It's designed to be small, something you can throw in your backpack, carry around, not feel it's too heavy. It does use the same organization system as the new edition of Nelson's, but this, I wouldn't recommend this dictionary. It's not that it's incorrect. It's not that it is somehow a poor representation of the language, but the problem is that you will outgrow this dictionary very quickly. I don't understand why students would buy a learner's dictionary or a compact dictionary, because very, very soon you'll find that you're looking for a character that hasn't been included. Why spend the money on the compact Nelson only a year later to have to spend more money on the new Nelsons or the old Nelsons? All right, let's get down to nuts and bolts. Here we have the chart that appears in both the old and the new Nelsons. And it's labeled, appropriately, the 214 historical radicals. It doesn't say Kangxi, but that's what we're looking at. This is the same collection of radicals that we saw in the lesson about radicals. But there's some differences about this chart, some important differences that I want to point out to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in just on this little section of radicals that have 4 strokes in them. Here's that section alone, okay? And this chart, unlike the last one we looked at, reads from left to right. So we know that this section is labeled 4 because every one of the radicals in this section has 4 strokes. Let's look at that first one. That's the radical for heart or spirit, kokoro. And underneath it, you see the number 61. That's its number in the Kangxi system. That's the number, no matter where you're looking in any Kangxi reference text, that's the number that it will have. It's the 61st one. That order never changes. But then look next to it. We see another radical, or is it another radical? Actually, it's the same one. It's just a variant. That heart radical, when it's on the bottom of a character, can look like that. And the people who put the Nelsons together indicate that by giving you the same number underneath, but in parentheses. Then if you look further over to the right, you'll see another radical. And this one has only 3 strokes in it, but it too is labeled 61. What's up with that? Well, in this case, this particular radical has a lot of different incarnations. And the last one, that has the square brackets, is actually one that we might think is only a 3-stroke radical. The square brackets indicate to you that if you are looking on the bigger chart, you may also find it under 3 strokes. So I guess you could also think of it this way. The square brackets indicate that that particular incarnation of the radical has a different number of strokes. But it's 61. No matter how you look at it, it's 61. All right. So here, what I've done is I have highlighted all of the radicals in this section. And you might think, well, what about all the ones that aren't highlighted? Why are they in the section? You're telling me they're not in the section? What I mean is, look at all of the squares that are white, and you'll notice that they all have their numbers in either brackets or parentheses. That means that they are a variant of a radical. So, for example, I'm going to give myself a pen. My software is a little bit slow today. So, for example, this character has a variant here. Notice they both have 77 underneath them. This character has a variant here. This character has a variant here. And when you get down to the bottom of this chart, you'll notice that there's a number of radicals. I'm underlining them all here. Pardon me. Except for 94. All of these, beginning with 96 and ending with 140, have a form that here has 4 strokes, but its original form will have more. That's why the numbers are higher than what we'd expect in this section. So that's the same for both the old and the new Nelsons. Now what I want to do is look at the original Nelsons. Here's what a page looks like in the original Nelsons. I kind of chose this one randomly. At the top of the page, you'll see a bold number. On this page, it's number 75. And what that is the radical number that's found on this page. As you flip through the book, you'll see that the numbers increase. Along the side of the page is a big long list of radicals. Those are all the 4-stroke radicals in the Kangxi system. Note that the radical that appears on this page, which is key or tree, appears in square brackets. And indeed, as you leaf through the pages of the dictionary, you can see those square brackets moving down throughout each of the sections. Here's a close-up of what it looks like. So we have the radical above moon, ski, and then we have key, and key is in brackets. That tells us that on this page, these are all characters that have that particular radical. The 5 that appears next to it indicates that all the kanji on this page have 5 residual strokes. And by residual, I mean the number of brush strokes in addition to the radical. For example, you'll see here I've given a list on the right-hand side of all the characters that appear on this page. And we've talked about brush strokes, so think about the brush strokes, think about drawing these characters, and you'll see that each one of them has 5 residual brush strokes in addition to the tree radical. Now, also at the bottom of the page, you can see a range. Here it's 2,224 through 2,237. That's the range of kanji on this page. Each kanji is assigned a discrete number in Nelson's. Let's look a little more closely at a page. So this is, on the left, we have the page we were just looking at, and I'm going to blow up a small section of it, just 2 characters, and then we can examine what those entries include. First of all, you'll notice that next to some of the characters in Nelson's, there's a B or an A. The B means the kanji is one of the kanji that 7th to 12th grade students in Japan are expected to know, as designated by the Ministry of Education. The A means the kanji is one of the kanji that 1st through 6th grade students or elementary school students are expected to know. I can't tell you how many times I've looked up a kanji and saw that it was an A or a B and thought, oh, I'm so stupid. I'll have to look that one up over and over and over again before I really commit it to memory. It's nice to have that information, but sometimes it just makes me feel dumb. All right, what else is there on this page? The top number of what looks like a fraction here is the successive number assigned to each main entry in the dictionary, the discrete number that I just mentioned. So the number for this particular kanji is 2234. The bottom number, F962, refers to the page number in a different dictionary in the Shokai Kanwa Jiten. That used to be a fairly commonly used dictionary, but it isn't anymore. And indeed, the new Nelsons won't refer it to it. So really, don't worry about it. You don't need to know it. I just thought I'd tell you what it is. Now you can forget it. If there's a character to the right of what looks like a fraction, it's a variant of the kanji. In other words, in some other fonts or perhaps in a complex form, when we talk about simplification, that will make more sense to you, it might look like that. Not all kanji have variants. As you can see below, this one here does not. We're only given one version of it. Next, we get the readings. The readings that are in small caps, in that font of small caps, are the onyomi of the character, or the sinicized reading of the character. And the reading in italics are the kunyomi of the character. So this particular character has an onyomi of hei. And it has more than one kunyomi. It has 3, e, gara, and tsuka. After each one of those, you're given a definition of what that character means. And sometimes, depending on the reading, the definition might be a little bit different. Now, that's just the meaning of the character, the kanji, that one kanji on its own. And then beneath that, we get the compounds. I had mentioned compounds earlier. These are arranged by the total number of strokes of the second character. Okay, not the first one, but the second one. And they give you a little number here next to it to tell you how many strokes that second character has. So, for example, sa, this character sa, plus this one is read sa shu. And it has 5 strokes. The shu has 5 strokes in it. So the new Nelson is really similar, but there's a couple little differences I wanted to point out. The old entry is on the left and the new entry is on the right. The total number of compounds is actually the same. They've changed the definition of one of them just a little bit, tweaked it a little bit. The columns in the new Nelsons are a little bit narrower, so the layout seems a bit different. But really, substantively, we're looking at very much the same kind of information. Here's the entry for the new Nelsons, and this is what's really different. So the top number, we don't have a 2-part fraction, now we have, I guess, a 3-part fraction. The top number is that discrete successive number assigned to each main entry in the dictionary. That's not too different than the old Nelsons. The middle is the Japan Industrial Standard, or the JIS code number of the character. If you're into computer programming, this might be really useful information. Otherwise, I don't think you could really use it. The third number that begins with an M is the number that's assigned to that kanji in Morohashi's dictionary, which we're going to get to in another few lessons. Now, the great thing about Nelson's is it also has a number of indices. It has phonetic indices that cover all the readings of all the characters, the onyomi and the kunyomi. And I have to say, if you know the reading of a character, it's a lot faster usually to use this index than to try and determine the radical, especially, strangely, for a lot of the easier, more beginning type kanji. Here's an example of the phonetic index from Nelson's underneath the letter E, the Roman letter E. And what we see here is, this is a small cap E, and then below that we have an italic E. All of these kanji here have an onyomi of e, and all of these kanji have a kunyomi of e. The one we were looking at earlier, on an earlier slide, is right here. So it's pretty easy to look up characters this way. The one thing I need to point out is that these numbers are not page numbers. They are the successive numbers assigned to each character, those discrete numbers. I've had students that have made that mistake, and it's been really frustrating for them. So be sure you're looking for the correct number, not the page number, but the kanji number. The other thing that's really new about the new Nelsons is the universal radical index. This is not something that you'll find in the old Nelsons, and as I said earlier, it's designed to help beginning and intermediate students. This index lists characters under multiple radicals, so even if you don't guess the right radical, you're likely to find your character. In other words, they've tried to anticipate all the different ways that somebody might look at a character, not just the one supposedly correct way to look at it under the Kangxi system. Let me give you an example. Here's a character with a lot of different parts to it. Under the universal radical index, you could look it up under this radical here, plus 9 strokes, and you'd find it in New Nelson's. Or you could look it up under just this one, plus 13 strokes, and you'd find it. You could instead look here, plus 10 strokes, and you defined it. And finally, you might look under this radical or its very close cousin, this one. I know they look almost the same. I'll flip back and forth for just a second and you can see there's a little bit of a difference there. So the universal radical index, which is at the back of the new Nelsons, is a very useful resource. I would encourage you to use your Nelsons. Look up some kanji from your textbook, from the manga you're reading, from whatever you like, and see if you can find what you're looking for. Again, this is a skill that takes a lot of time to develop, and it's a very important skill, by the way, for the midterm exam.